So I'm sure you're all familiar with this book. I treat this as if I need to find a location, if I'm looking for the diacriticals, I go to this book because it's so valuable. But in this book, one of the leads that it gave me was that the house of Queen Uokalani was on Robello Lane, which was on the back side of Honolulu Community College. And to have some sort of relationship between the Queen and the college was important for me to know. And so what I did was started trying to figure out what corner of Robello Lane the house was on. And that's when I discovered through this research process, the house was actually across the street. So this is the citation for that article. I did not get the cover that year. If any of you know Ron Williams, I think he got 2 covers in a row for the first 2 articles he did. So this is the sense of remembering. This is my namesake, Ralph Kuykendall. He says, history becomes more real when we can stand upon some spot of ground and in imagination picture the great events that happened there. Now this is an example of something that in some circles is antithetical to preservation because these spaces are already gone. The sites have been cleared of the places that were there. But I think, and I hope that the article that I wrote on these homes helps people to stand in those spaces and get a better understanding of what was once there. So this is Princess Ruth. She has gotten Central Middle School renamed for her. So I think that things are changing. So Sam Parker, Parker Ranch, you're familiar with that name, and John Adams Cummins were in this picture with her. So I have her as a daughter of Kalani Pauahi and Kekua Noa. But of course there is speculation that her father may have been someone else, and they even have a Hawaiian word for that. So born June 17th, 1826, that's pretty well established for people born at that time. And died May 24th, 1883. So this is the map that started me realizing that the house that I was searching for actually wasn't there. So you see the shape of this house. It's a square here and then a wing that goes off to the side. Across the street was a reform school, so you can tell just by that that there wasn't any not in my backyard happening at that time. In fact, Princess Ruth would invite the boys who were in a band to play music at her house. The Dowsets of Nuuanu were the Dowsets of Kapālama. And the lane that was next to that house was called Dowset Lane. It's now known as a Kepo Lane. So these maps are available for any of you. If you want to go to the, there's a map survey section of DAGs, and they have those all online. So this is just an example of it. And this is how hard it is to do research for times that are long past. So this picture does not survive because this is Princess Ruth's house. It purely survives because it was where the Palama Chinese school had their classes. So if you're looking up, looking for Princess Ruth's house, you're not going to find it under that. You're only going to know it after you know that it's already there and who went in. There was a map down at the Bishop Estate. They wouldn't let me get permission for it, but it actually has these trees on the map. That's how detailed that map was. Here's one of the people that eventually lived in the same house. So when they say his Palama residence, this is the house that his body was laid and stayed at. Joseph Nawahi, he was famous as a legislator, also as a patriot. He died of tuberculosis probably as a result of his imprisonment after the counter-revolution of 1895. He was one of the people that helped author the 1893 Constitution, which resulted in the overthrow of Queen uokalani. Now this one, the journal does it no justice, but it's not their fault. This map is terribly poor. But here you'll see that shape that you saw on the other map, and it says old house. So if you're looking for her name, you're not going to find it on this map.
What is the year of that map?
Oh. 1901 it says?
Yeah.
So this entire lot here was the lot of Mauna Kamala. And these streets were put in afterwards. So, when you're driving down Kanoa and Banyan, you're actually driving over the location of the house. Now, I wanted to have a brick outline done of the house. I don't think that'll pass muster on city roads. As you can see, a number of other residents are here now. So on this side is the Kamakapili Church and their campus. And then there's a set of buildings like this on the other three of the four quadrants. So sometimes you'll get a chance at a picture when you're actually looking for something else. So you can see, if you move this piece and pull it down here, you have the original shape of the house. So the house was down here. They relocated it up in an empty lot at the top here. Now, Vineyard is probably at the top of this screen. Whoops. So this house, if you look at, there's a veranda around that section of it. So these are up on Kukui Street. As I said, Vineyard was probably where the top of the screen was. This is looking from Vineyard down towards that lot. And the only reason they took this picture was not because of the remnant of Princess Ruth's house. They took this picture because during the war they were planting gardens to have food. So this is in the collection of the Palama settlement. They have their own little archives there. Kamakapili was on one of the quadrants of Princess Ruth's lot. This is when it was at the top of Smith Street, named for Reverend Smith, and the embers from another fire landed up here, too high for the firefighters to get to. although one tried running up the tower to put it out, but he wasn't able to. This is the current Kamokapili on one of those quadrants. And you can see it shares some of the architectural features, the Gothic windows, sort of two towers. Many people say this is the third church. I think it's the fourth church. The third one I would put behind Palama Fire Station, because that's where they relocated between the fire and 1911 when they built the new place. If your church has just been destroyed by fire, you want to be in a location close to a fire station.
Fair enough.
And this is the site today. Kamokapili was on one quadrant. St. Elizabeth's Church, Episcopal Church, is on another quadrant. Again, a houseless individual. This area has more houseless individuals than I have seen in many, many years. So now we're going to go to the house of then Princess and later Queen uokalani. Any flower experts? Crown flower. And it's the crown flower. I put this as the background because it was uokalani's favorite flower. So this is from place names. When they give the names, they often will put the literal translation for. So innumerable royal buds is the translation of the name of her house. Don't know if it was crown flowers, but I like to think that she would name it for her favorite flower. So if you've ever visited Bishop Museum, all of the diaries are there available. You'll never get to them. You might be able to get to a transcription. I had a question on one of my quotes. I asked them if I could to see the actual diary to see if the transcription was right. They gave me the transcription back in my return email. But David Forbes, before he passed, did a book on the diaries. So I see if he wrote it down in a certain way, I'm pretty sure it's that way. Yeah. So took a drive with Mrs. Yu, that's Una, and Mrs. Wilson, that would have been Johnny Wilson's mom.
Kitty.
Okay, thank you. To my new house. So this is the first entry. So we have that 1881 map. This is a quote from 1885. And what was very interesting to me was the ritual that surrounded going into a new house. So I don't, the direction from which you would go. The two fish, the day of the week, day of the month, so for those of you familiar with the Hawaiian calendar, there were days that were kapu, there were days that they would not have any, would be free to do things. So enter at the back of the house up to the tabu enclosure of the house. And her note to herself, don't forget. So I don't know the significance of this day. I know that there weren't any sacrifices on the day of the month. Although the kapu system was no longer in place, and yet there's that respect for the system that was there. So the piko hale, in a hale pili, you'd have an uncut piece above the doorway, and the ceremony was cutting that off, and that marked the beginning of the house. So although this was a Western-style house, you still had a respect for the traditions of the past. Her moving into the house kept being delayed. So this is the day I am supposed to take possession of this house. And here's where she names it. I think I shall call it uokalani. And this portion here, speculative. Uokalani was one of the names of Princess Ruth that was used in one of the mele with all of the brothers. Now, why am I putting an extended written description here? It's because I have no pictures of the house. Think of no pictures of the White House. It's incomprehensible to me. But in the record, I can find a number of pictures of Sanford Dole's house, the interiors in Sanford Dole's house, but of this structure, I have none. I have some, but you'll see. So if you imagine the size of it and the shape of it, you can see that it was a large residence. So the same width as Iolani Palace on the front face. And a veranda facing towards Diamond Head. So the L shape, they had single-story wing here, and then the L went up here. They had a veranda on this side that allowed, in those days, you could actually see across town to Diamond Head. So place names had those confusing references that I talked about earlier. So Robello, the lane that was the site of Queen uokalani's Palama home. And that book was from a source that was in the newspaper. So Honolulu street names. One of the things I wish was that there was a chance for another author to update because there are a number of places that from time to time you have people finding errors. Fortunately, some of the confusing references, there's one in place names that says about this Queen uokalani Children's Center. You can't find this picture anymore. They have abandoned that location. So there no longer is the problem with uokalani being at one site and where it really wasn't. Any singers in here? Casimeros have a wonderful version of this song. He mea nui ke aloha. Now, that's all I'm going to do. So this is, I would say, one of maybe a half dozen mele that are devoted to houses. It is a beauty, always a thing forever, for all seasons. So there's a sadness in that phrase because the house is gone.
Did the Queen write this?
This song, yes. And there are various events that took place at the house. So receptions. Her friend Henry Berger So this is an 1887 map. And here's how history works. You put the wrong name in different maps. So this one has R, Ke elikōlani, wrong also. But you can see the L shape of the house. So this is one of the early maps that I found, and I thought, oh, that's where Princess Ruth's house was.
Right.
But then as I did more research, you'd find the...
There, that's,
Yep. So she receives the invitation to the Victoria's Jubilee, the Golden Jubilee, along with Queen Kapālama. So Queen Kapālama and Princess uokalani go up to, but that's where they receive the invitation. So the Constitution of 1887, I'm just putting it into context. And these are guests who arrive in October of 1887. So Gina Sobrero was in the aristocracy of Italy. And I think she was led to believe that Robert Wilcox was somehow royal. He was returning from Italy because the Bayonet Constitution forced the ending of the Students Abroad program that he was a part of. And eventually, uokalani asked her to name their daughter uokalani. I believe that daughter did not survive. The birthday for uokalani was held at the home. So it had a beautiful grounds. It was close enough to town. But after the death of Mary Dominus, Queen uokalani moved from that home down to Washington Place, which would have been for her a more comfortable place after the death of her mother-in-law. The Wilcox Rebellion, 1889, he tried to overturn the Bayonet Constitution. The planning went on in the house. The rebellion started from the banyan tree next to the house. Was uokalani involved? No, she was never arrested, so I guess not. But they marched from there down King Street to the palace. This 1897 map shows, oh, they misspelled it again. But it's next to the house. This is Princess Ruth's house. And this little circle there, tree is a well, because they were drilling their own wells until everyone dug so many that the pressure was no longer pushing up the water. That's why you can't drill one today on your own property. Okay, so the Constitution of 1893, one of the reasons why they say that the overthrow occurred was drafted at that house. So although she wasn't living there anymore, it was an area that could serve as a meeting space. And this is why I find it just odd that I can't find a picture of the house, because it served as the British consulate. Now, I did go to England, but they had just transferred their records from one branch to another. So next trip, I'll have to go looking for the picture. So this is Albert George Sidney Hawes. And he sadly died during his stay here. So he would have birthdays for Queen Victoria, those sorts of events. It became a social place to have those gatherings.
So he actually leased the house while she was in prison.
Yep. And strangely enough, Princess Ruth had a downtown location that they made into the Honolulu High School. And their claim was they couldn't rent such large places. But they obviously rented this one. So this is the most detailed drawing of Mulalani that I can print. There is one in the Bishop Estate maps that is detailed to where the trees were planted. But that's of Princess Ruth's house. So you see the curved stairways here? And this is the wing that had the veranda that looked out over Diamond Head. So Lucas Brothers built this building, and they also built Mulaulani. Notice the curved stairways here. So if I'm looking for a picture, I look for that detail to see if that is a picture. After Hawes, W.J. Kenny, and it was a place to play cricket. After all, this is a British consulate.
They had that big backyard.
Also. So this is the first time, instead of referring to it simply as Mulaulani, or they refer to a street address. And then it became a Japanese hotel. So I guess they could have rented Princess Ruth's Emma Street house and made it into a hotel also. The old British consulate, old because it's already not the British consulate anymore, opposite the Dowsett Homestead, which we saw on one of the earlier maps, is now being used as a Japanese hotel. So this is a typical entry from the Houston directory. And in this directory, there is a reference to the Nakata. And they give an address for North King Street. And the entries cease in 1903 or 1904. So that's one of the problems with using city directories. You don't know when they collected the information. But it at least gives you a broad range of when that ended as a hotel. Queen elikōlani was trying to recover monies from the federal government, and so she took a $70,000 mortgage, which is, for that time, a huge amount, from Klaus Spreckels, you recognize as the, I think they called him the Sugar King. I think I have written about more parks that should have been that never ended up being parks. This is one of them. So on the elikōlani premises, Mulaulani, they had hoped to have a park there. So you can still see the outline of it's called tenements. Tenements isn't the pejorative that it has today. It just meant that more unrelated people lived in the structure. But here you have a bicycle repair and laundry. So this is, and moving pictures. This is King Street. At one time earlier, it was called Palama Street until they renamed Insane Asylum Road, Palama Road. (1927), the main house has been torn down and 6 identical structures in its place. But this wing is still the wing with the circular room there.
Yeah.
This is the only picture I have of uokalani. Well, kind of. So here you see that circular area and the L shape.
Just set the other, anywhere off there.
Perfect. So this is an aerial taken by the Hawaiian Housing Commission. So they're not trying to document this for my help. So the same in 1950, and then Mayor Wright Homes is built in 1952. And named for George Frederick Wright because he died in office right before they were going to build it. Not much building being done except for military during World War II. So this is an aerial in 1953. So Lili, King Street. And it was a showcase in 1953. They were so very proud of it. You can see that in 1956, 3 of the 6 structures are still intact. And today, Building 2 is most of what exists of the property that would have been where uokalani was. So this is Liu's Trading. They do granite and that sort of stone. The Shell Station and Building 2. So L shape would have come down, Building 2, and then that area.
So those building 2 front doors are facing diagonal, that would be where the veranda was?
I think so. And Mayor Wright Homes has plans for the future, which includes large towers, 260 to 380 feet tall. So just under the height of the first Hawaiian towers. And this is more of a ground level with the smaller buildings.
Ralph, question?
Yes,
I've always known it as Mayor Wright Housing. If it's homes,
I believe it's homes. Yeah, because I don't like using the word homes, although it's in my title. But yeah, home has a different connotation than housing. And I think they consider them to be homes. So these are where the various portions of that are. So Shell Station, Liu Trading here. Up in this area is where elikōlani's home was. If I owned the architectural firm, I'd have them put a park dedicated to elikōlani in that corner there. And who knows what they're going to build there. This is conceptual from the architects for this project. I talked earlier about how this has shaped what I've been doing. And when I wrote the book about the two homes, there's a third home. It's Prince Albert's home. I haven't included in the talk today, but he's another royal who lived in the area. But what it led me to do was to think, why not expand it to all of the residences? And that's when I started work on this book. So this book just came out last year. And when we think of royal palaces, we think of the ones that are existing. And this goes back to Ralph Kuykendall, to be able to stand someplace. And so we think of these palaces. Unfortunately, in terms of architectural style, Kapālama, Ulihe, and Washington Place, all built within roughly a little over a decade. So you're not going to get much variance in that. And they're all in Greek Revival style, which was popular at that moment. Iolani Palace has a very difficult time of figuring out what type of architecture it is. The newspaper had it was almost like a catchphrase. If anything, we could call it American Florentine. But that's not a real architectural style, so, but that's the term that got carried all throughout. So the full range of residences are more accurately portrayed in the different ones that are there. So this building has a mansard roof there. It has a detail that's in Iolani Palace. That's Princess Ruth's home on Emma Street. It's called Kūnuiākea, and this is taller than Iolani Palace.
It's located where Foster Gardens is or under the freeway?
This house was located where Central Intermediate was, now elikōlani, I think, intermediate school. And this, of course, has those stairs that I'm going to be looking for. But this is a clear architectural style.
Yeah.
And it's a style that you really don't have represented by the various palaces that are surviving. So
when Princess Ruth died, then Pauahi and Charles Reed Bishop inherited that, correct?
I think Emma was in the middle. I think Emma had she could have stayed there, and then it went to the bishops. And there was a gate on the front here that had a giant B on it. B for bishop. They ordered it from Germany, and it didn't arrive in time before Princess Bernice Pauahi died. So if you go to Bishop Museum, that gate is there. If you walk from the main building out to where the archives is, you can see the gate with the B on it.
It's supposed to be for that. Yeah.
And there is actually a picture of this house sitting next to building, I think it's building A of elikōlani school. And if you go to that building and look up on the second story, it says Ke elikōlani School. So I think there may have been plans that didn't go forward. So I would not have gotten to this point if I had not written this book. This book was actually published before. Could you hold up the other one? Okay, so the blue one, Death Rights in Hawaiian Royalty, was actually the second book I wrote. Because every time I went looking for lost palaces, I found funerals held at the homes. And I just pushed those off into a file. And then I found it easier to publish the pushed off file. Okay, why don't I save the rest of the time just for questions?
I have a question. It's like now you see it, now you don't. Between 1915 and you had a 1920s date, the home of Queen Lili uokalani totally disappears. How does that come about? Who owns that property?
Okay, so
Do
that
you know
property,
anything about the forces behind, like it's there and then it's not there anymore? And the whole neighborhood appears radically to have changed.
yeah, it did radically change. So Dowsett Lane became a Kepo Lane. Dowsett's moved up into New Wanu. A lot of the land down there was Bishop Estate land. So Bishop Estate on the Mauna Kamala site, that was a lo'i, so there was taro planted around the house of Princess Ruth. They brought in not truckloads, wheelbarrow loads, tens of thousands of them, that leveled off that site. So their strategy was to subdivide and sell that. Now, if you go to up Palama Road to Vineyard, there's a service station there. If you take a look at the house that's behind the service station, it is around 3 feet lower than the street level. And that's the same level that that lot would have been. So there are a lot of things that over time people change, and this area is one of those areas of change. Question?
I have two questions about uokalani. It seems I remember years ago hearing this, but I'm not sure if it's true, that uokalani was a retreat, kind of, the queen wants to get out of the city and all the politics and bring, and you mentioned, her close allies, and that they would meet over there as opposed to at the Elikōlani Palace, because there was so much turmoil going on there. I don't know if that's true.
Yeah, I think it is true, because this was considered, if you will, this was her suburban house. So they purposely moved to that area because it was quieter and greener. In fact, one of the early accounts has that area of flooding and there being little rivers of water coming down. So it isn't as dry as I sense it today.
And then the other question is that there was a link to the Kamehameha schools had something going on in that area?
So Bishop Estate owned the entire property of Mauna Kamala.
I think I heard that there was the boys' school was down there.
Oh,
The girls' school, actually.
the boys and girls school would have been down where Farrington is.
Yeah.
The reform school was not incarceration, but it was for the young men who needed a little more. And they moved Kūnuiākea School. They knew eventually the Reform School would move, so that's why that site was picked. Originally Palama School, but after the death of Princess Kūnuiākea, changed. Now in the back corner is a portion of the banyan tree from Ainahau. So that banyan tree is still there. Question?
Hi, Rob. I have two questions for you. The first one's about your process, researching, and you kind of alluded to it with all of your files. But you write so broadly on such interesting topics in Hawaii's history. I'm just wondering, how do you choose what to write next? Because I've seen your articles, and it's on so many different facets of history. So that's question one. And then question two is, what file are you developing to publish next? Or what's going on with that?
Okay. I would classify my process as organic. So if I had not written an article on banyan trees, I never would have gotten to this point. Because there's a trail that you can follow, breadcrumbs that lead to here.
That explains so much when I'd see you at all these different archives, and I'd just ask you what you're researching, and it'd always be a different topic, like every day of the week, so that makes sense.
So basically, you're researching something and you come across something interesting that you put in another box for later, right?
Yes, I was teaching a class, and I mentioned, it was on contract laborers. And I thought, I wonder if these contracts were similar to the contracts that were given to slaves following Reconstruction. I thought, what a wonderful topic. And that would have been my next topic, except in my research, 1903, already an article on that exact topic that is just, it's a wonder of an article. So they made connections with the indentured servants, laws in Massachusetts. I guess it'd be possible to expand it, but, and your second question was?
Oh, just which research file has accumulated enough info to publish? Or,
Oh.
no, what are you publishing or working on right now?
Okay, so I am working on another lost book. This is called Lost Honolulu. I shouldn't give them titles because publishers like to give things titles. And I shouldn't even write them in whole because publishers want to have you assign something. But it looks at all the buildings from 1893 to 1900 that have been destroyed. So, for instance, the Elite Building that was on Hotel Street and Adams Lane. That was okay. That was one of the buildings downtown. But if you look on Bishop Street, the Theo H. Davies building, the building the First Hawaiian was in, Bank of Hawaii, Bishop Trust building. These are all buildings that are gone. And they were, I don't think you can find a Greek column or Roman column on any of the buildings in that area now. But they went all the way basically down Bishop. That's what I'm working on.
You had mentioned earlier that you had always wished someone updated the Honolulu street names. May I suggest you are the man?
I don't know that process. And I only have one entry to correct.
That's a start.
I have similar things as a historian myself. I can go with Ralph's thing, but when you're looking for one topic, you get off and you see something else. And for me, my greatest experience with that was I'm looking for a topic over here, and I'm going through rolls before everything was digitalized, and I came across an article from a local missionary son who says he was in that says he was in the American Civil War, and I went, what? And somebody from Hawaii was in the Civil War, and I dropped everything else, and now I'm writing about the Civil War. Who from Hawaii is in the Civil War?
Yes, it's,
If you want to get anything done, do not start reading old newspapers.
and,
Over here,
oh, if I could comment on bias. So there used to be a time that there was no newspapers.com. There was only the Library of Congress chronicling America. They did not have the advertiser digitized. They had the Hawaiian Gazette. So if you look at a certain period of time, a lot of the articles have Hawaiian Gazette references and not out of the paper that really the Hawaiian Gazette got its materials from. It's this digitization process, although you have the benefit of being able to search it, often that search field will not allow, it doesn't have it. So one of the features is it will invert the letter N, make it into a letter U. So I end up sometimes doing a search of elikōlani, making the N into a U, and it'll pull up, because I've seen the article and I know that her name is in there, but it's not being pulled up.
That's a great search tip for us librarians, because when we, and the instructors in the room, because I know when I'm teaching students to search the catalog when it's Hawaiian names or genealogy or anything, I say often the transcription, you have to almost misspell names sometimes. I say try several different misspellings of your family name, to find more results. But
Yeah.
I didn't
So not
tell them
necessarily.
about the N and the U.
Oh, the E and the O, because it's so slight that sometimes that comes up.
Reads the AI reads the typesetting as a,
Yep.
yes.
Yes.
Maybe talk a little bit about today is getting Colin to use Hawaiian language newspapers to the extent you can. Have you had experience with it?
Yeah, you're going to have the same experience in terms of the letters not being transcribed correctly. Fortunately, most times they weren't using using diacriticals on them, so you're at least a little bit helped by that.
But your experience using, are you using Hawaiian language newspapers?
Right. So I do not speak Olelo Hawaii, and that's one of the areas that I really should be learning the language entirely. It's something that is needed. I can spot names. I can spot certain words. I do have a Hawaiian vocabulary, probably a preschooler's vocabulary. But just that knowledge will often get you to a point where you know an article is probably relevant. And I know a number of people that do speak Olelo Hawaii, and they're able to help me.
Doesn't the archive have a translator?
They do, but they will only translate items in the archives. And not everyone.
Do we have any other questions for Rob?
Well, thank you so much for joining today.